Captain He Jin stood at the bridge of the Earth exploration vessel Horizon, her eyes fixed on the blue-green planet growing larger on the main screen. After 6 months of space travel, they had finally reached Kepler 186f. The planet looked surprisingly like Earth, with vast oceans and green continents under swirling white clouds. "Captain, we're picking up artificial signals from the surface," reported Communications Officer Jinho, his fingers moving quickly across his control panel. They seemed to be using radio waves, similar to what Earth used in the mid-20th century. He-Jin nodded, her heart beating faster. This was why they had come. After years of searching the stars, humanity had finally found another intelligent civilization. The signals had first been detected 3 years ago, leading to this mission. Now, they were about to make history. "Dr. Taeyong, are you ready with the first contact protocols?" He-Jin asked, turning to the ship's head linguist. The young doctor sat surrounded by screens showing various translation algorithms and communication patterns. "Yes, Captain," Taeyong replied, pushing her glasses up her nose. "We've analyzed their radio broadcasts for months. Their language structure seems simpler than Earth languages, which should make communication easier." He-Jin touched the golden oak leaf pin on her collar, a habit she had developed when making important decisions. It had belonged to her grandmother, who had always encouraged her to reach for the stars. "Send the greeting signal as planned. Let's tell our new neighbors that we're here." The bridge crew worked quietly as they sent the carefully crafted message. It contained basic mathematical sequences, simple pictograms, and peaceful intentions represented through universal symbols. They had practiced this moment countless times, but now it felt different. The fate of humanity's first alien contact rested on their shoulders. Minutes passed like hours as they waited for a response. Then, Jinho's console lit up with incoming signals. "Captain, they're responding." Jinho's voice was filled with excitement. They're sending landing coordinates." The response was faster than anyone had expected. Most of their simulations had predicted days or weeks of basic signal exchanges before reaching this stage. He-Jin studied the data on her screen, then made her decision. "Prepare the landing team," she ordered. "Dr. Taeyong, you'll lead the communication efforts. We'll take the small shuttle. Keep the main ship in orbit as backup." 3 hours later, He-Jin stood in the shuttle bay with her chosen team. Dr. Taeyong checked her translation devices one last time. Security Officer Do-hyun inspected their defensive equipment, non-lethal only, as per first contact protocols. Medical Officer Song-yi packed her specialized scanning equipment, ready to study any biological differences they might encounter. As they boarded the shuttle, He-Jin addressed her team. "Remember your training. We're making history today. But more importantly, we're building a bridge between two civilizations. Stay alert, stay calm, and stay curious." The descent through the atmosphere was smooth. Through the shuttle windows, they could see a city spread out below them. It wasn't as advanced as Earth's cities, but they could see vehicles moving on roads and buildings that reached for the sky. The aliens had directed them to land in what appeared to be a large public square. As they touched down, He-Jin saw hundreds of figures gathered around the landing zone. They were being kept back by what looked like local security forces. Her first glimpse of the aliens made her gasp quietly. They looked almost human, except their skin seemed to glow with a soft, blue-white light, and their eyes were slightly larger than human eyes. "They're humanoid," Song-yi whispered, already taking readings with her medical scanner. "The resemblance is uncanny. This defies all our expectations about convergent evolution." He-Jin took a deep breath. "Let's meet our hosts." The team walked down the shuttle's ramp in practiced formation. He-Jin led, with Taeyong slightly behind her left shoulder. Do-hyun stayed alert, scanning the crowd, while Song-yi continued her readings. A group of aliens approached them. Their leader wore flowing robes that seemed to shimmer with the same bioluminescence as their skin. Dr. Taeyong stepped forward with her translation device ready, but before she could activate it, the alien leader spoke. What happened next would change human history forever. "Welcome, travelers from Earth," the alien said in perfect, though strangely accented, Korean. "We have waited many generations for your return." Hye-jin froze. Behind her, she heard Tae-young drop her translation device. The sound of it hitting the ground seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. You speak our language?" Hye-jin managed to ask, her training momentarily forgotten in her shock. The alien leader, who introduced herself as Era, smiled. The expression made her whole face glow brighter. "Our ancestors spoke your language, human," she said. "We have preserved it in our sacred texts for 5,000 years, though many words were lost to time. We knew someday our star brothers would return." The crowd of aliens had gone completely silent. Hye-jin could feel the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. Something incredible was happening here, something that went far beyond first contact. "How is this possible?" Tae-young asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming her shock. Korean as a language didn't even exist 5,000 years ago, at least not in its current form. Era's expression became serious. "Come," she said, gesturing toward a large building behind her. "There is much we must show you. Our histories speak of a great journey across the stars, though much has been lost to time. But we never forgot the language of our ancestors, even when we forgot its meaning. We kept it alive in our ceremonies and our most sacred texts." As they walked toward the building, Hye-jin noticed more details about their hosts. Their movements were graceful, almost floating. Their glowing skin pulsed slightly with their emotions. Era's grew brighter when she spoke of their history. The crowd parted before them, many bowing their heads in what seemed like reverence. The implications of this meeting were staggering. Either humans had achieved space travel thousands of years ago and somehow forgotten it, or there was an even more incredible explanation waiting to be discovered. Either way, this was far more than a first contact mission now. Hye-jin touched her grandmother's pin again, wishing the old woman could see this moment. She had always told Hye-jin that the stars held secrets beyond imagination. How right she had been. "Captain," Song-ye whispered, looking at her scanner readings. "Their DNA, it's showing patterns similar to human DNA. Not identical, but the similarities are far too great to be coincidental." Before Hye-jin could respond, they reached the building's entrance. Era turned to face them, her skin glowing with intense blue-white light. "Welcome to the Hall of Ancestors," she said. "Here, we keep the records of our beginning, of our journey from Earth, of the great separation that led our people to evolve differently." As the massive doors swung open, Hye-jin saw walls covered in what was unmistakably Hangul script, glowing with the same bioluminescence as their hosts. The writing looked ancient, yet the characters were clear and familiar. "Impossible," Tae-young breathed, already pulling out her recording equipment. "This changes everything we know about human history." Hye-jin stepped forward, her training reminding her of her duty to Earth and her mission. "We are honored by your welcome," she said formally to Era, "and we have many questions." Era's smile grew wider, her glow pulsing with what seemed like joy. "As do we, Star Brothers. As do we. Come, let us share the story of how our peoples were once one, and how we came to be parted by time and space. It is a story we have waited 5,000 years to tell." As they followed Era into the Hall of Ancestors, Hye-jin couldn't help but think that this was more than first contact. This was a reunion, one that would reshape humanity's understanding of its own history and its place among the stars. Behind her, she heard Do-hyun whisper, "No one back on Earth is going to believe this." Hye-jin smiled. He was wrong about that. Soon, everyone on Earth would believe it. They would have to, because the evidence was all around them, written in their own language on the walls of an alien world. The Hall of Ancestors was unlike anything the Earth team had ever seen. The walls glowed with the same soft light as the Lumini's skin, making the ancient Korean characters seem to float in the air. Dr. Taeyong moved from wall to wall, her camera clicking constantly as she recorded the texts. "These writings," she said, her voice filled with wonder, "they're a form of ancient Korean. But some characters are different from what we know today. This is incredible." Hejin watched as Era led them deeper into the hall. The alien leader's skin glowed brighter with each step, showing her excitement. Behind them, Officer Do-hyun kept a watchful eye on their surroundings, though it was clear the Lumini meant them no harm. "Our oldest stories tell us that our ancestors came from a blue world circling a yellow star," Era explained, stopping before a large wall covered in glowing text and simple drawings. "They traveled in great ships made of crystal and light. But something happened, a great disaster that forced them to land here and abandon their ships." Dr. Song-Yai stepped forward, her medical scanner humming quietly. "The genetic similarities between your people and ours are remarkable," she said. "But your bioluminescence, that's new. An adaptation to this world, perhaps." Era nodded, her glow pulsing gently. "Our world has longer nights than Earth. Over many generations, our bodies changed to help us see in the dark. The glow became part of who we are." They moved into a circular room where the walls were covered with drawings of strange ships. The ships looked like they were made of transparent crystal, with light flowing through them like water. Hejin had never seen anything like them in all her years of space travel. "These were their ships?" she asked, touching the wall gently. "How did they work?" A new voice answered from behind them. "We have been trying to understand that for generations." They turned to see another Lumini approaching. This one wore simpler robes and carried what looked like electronic tablets. "This is Nuri, our chief historian," Era introduced. "She has spent her life studying the ancient texts." Nuri bowed slightly to the Earth team. "The ships used crystals that could capture and channel the energy of stars," she explained. "But the knowledge of how to make and use these crystals was lost long ago. We have only stories and these drawings." Dr. Taeyong had been quiet for a while, studying the texts intensely. Now she spoke up, her voice excited. "Captain, look at this section. It talks about a place called Goryeo. That's an ancient name for Korea." Hejin moved to where Taeyong was pointing. The characters were clear enough to read, though some were oddly shaped. The text spoke of a group of people who left Earth during what would have been the Bronze Age. They had discovered something extraordinary, crystals that could harness the power of stars. "But why isn't this in Earth's history?" Do-hyun asked, speaking what everyone was thinking. "How could we forget that we had this technology?" Nuri stepped forward, her skin glowing with a slightly different color, a deeper blue that seemed to indicate seriousness. "The texts speak of a choice," she said. "The travelers knew that humanity wasn't ready for this power. They feared it would be used for war. So they chose to leave, taking the crystal knowledge with them." "And they came here?" Hejin asked. "Not at first," Era answered. "The texts speak of many worlds they visited. But then something happened, a great flash in the sky that damaged their ships. They landed here because they had no choice. Many of the crystals were destroyed in the landing." Song-Yi was looking at her scanner with growing excitement. "Captain, these readings are fascinating. The Lumini's bioluminescence, it's not just an adaptation. Their bodies seem to have absorbed some properties of the crystals their ancestors used. Their light isn't just for seeing in the dark. It's a remnant of the ancient technology." Hejin felt her head spinning with the implications. Humans had achieved space travel thousands of years ago, using technology they still couldn't understand today. And here was the proof, not just in the writings on the walls, but in the very bodies of the Lumini people. "There's more," Nuri said, leading them to another room. This one was smaller, and in its center stood a display case. Inside was a crystal about the size of Hejin's hand. Unlike the Lumini's soft glow, this crystal seemed to contain swirling galaxies of light. "Our last remaining ship crystal," Era explained. "It no longer works, but we have kept it safe through all our generations. We hoped that one day, when our star brothers returned, we might together unlock its secrets again. Do-hyun stepped closer to the crystal, his security training forgotten in his fascination. "It's beautiful," he breathed. "But how did they make it? What's it made of?" "Our scientists have studied it for centuries," Nuri said, "but we cannot replicate it." The knowledge truly was lost. Hajin stood before the crystal, thinking hard. This discovery would change everything back on Earth. It would rewrite their understanding of human history, of their technological capabilities, of their place in the universe. But it also raised so many questions. Why Korean? She asked suddenly. Why did your ancestors speak Korean specifically? Era and Nuri exchanged glances. The texts say they came from a peninsula surrounded by seas. Nuri answered. They were a group of scholars and craftspeople who discovered the crystal's properties by accident. They kept their discovery secret, fearing what might happen if powerful nations learned of it. So they left, Taeyong finished, understanding dawning on her face, taking their secret with them. And over thousands of years, their language became your sacred tongue, even as your people evolved and changed. Yes, Era said simply. We always knew we came from beyond the stars. We kept the language alive in our ceremonies, in our most important texts. Even when we forgot what many words meant, we passed them down exactly as they were written. Hajin turned to her team. We need to document everything. Every text, every drawing, every story. Earth needs to know about this, but we need to be thorough. This isn't just first contact anymore. This is recovering our own lost history. The team spread out through the hall, each focusing on their specialty. Taeyong worked with Nuri, translating and recording the ancient texts. Song-yi took detailed scans of the Lumini, trying to understand how their bodies had changed over millennia. Do-hyun examined the crystal with Era, learning about their attempts to understand its power. As Hajin watched them work, she touched her grandmother's pin again. The old woman had always said that the stars held secrets, but she couldn't have imagined this, that humanity's greatest secret had been waiting for them on a distant world, preserved by the descendants of ancient Korean travelers who had achieved what modern humans had only recently managed to do again. Captain, Era said softly, coming to stand beside her. There is one more thing you should see, something we have saved for this moment. She led Hajin to a small room off the main hall. Inside was a single pedestal, and on it lay what looked like a book. But unlike the glowing walls, this was made of actual paper, preserved somehow through the millennia. The last journal of our ancestors, Era explained, written in the final days of their journey. We have kept it safe, though none of us could read its later pages. Would you like to see what they wrote? Hajin stepped forward, her heart pounding. As she carefully opened the ancient book, she saw Korean characters, written by hand thousands of years ago. The first words made her catch her breath. To those who follow us among the stars, we leave this record so you will understand why we chose this path. The power we discovered was too great for our time. Perhaps when you find us, humanity will be ready for it. Until then, we will keep the knowledge safe and watch the skies for your coming. Hajin looked up at Ara, seeing the same deep understanding in the alien woman's glowing eyes. This wasn't just a discovery of lost history or forgotten technology. It was a message from their shared ancestors, a bridge across time and space, waiting for the moment when both peoples were ready to meet again. The ancient journal changed everything. For 3 days, Dr. Taeyong barely slept as she worked with Nuri to translate every page. Hajin watched as her linguist's excitement grew with each new discovery. Captain, you need to see this. Taeyong called out on the morning of the 4th day. Her eyes were tired but bright with excitement. She held up her tablet, which showed pictures of the journal's pages alongside her translations. Hajin walked over to the small room they had turned into their research center. Do-hyun and Song-yi joined them, equally curious about what Taeyong had found. The journal was written by a woman named My Sun, Taeyong explained. She was a crystal craftsperson. Listen to this part. She began to read from her translation. The crystal first sang to me on a spring morning. I was cleaning the river rocks we used for pottery when I found it. Clear as water, but with starlight trapped inside. When sunlight touched it, it hummed with a sound like distant bells. That was how we learned that crystals could talk to the stars. Talk to the stars? Du-hyun asked, leaning forward. What does that mean? Song Yi's medical scanner beeped softly as she pointed it at the journal. The crystal residue on these pages matches the energy pattern I found in the Lumini's bioluminescent cells, she said. These aren't just stories. This is scientific documentation. Hye-jin turned to Nuri, who stood quietly in the corner. Your ancestors kept this safe for 5,000 years. The Lumini historian's skin pulsed with gentle light. Yes, though we lost the ability to read it, we knew it held important secrets. The last wishes of my son were clear: keep the knowledge safe until Earth was ready. Tae-young scrolled through more translated pages on her tablet. According to this, they didn't just find one crystal. They found a whole cave of them, near what we now call the Han River. Each crystal responded differently to light and sound. They learned that certain crystals could store energy from starlight. But how did they make the jump from storing energy to space travel? Hye-jin asked. Era entered the room, carrying what looked like an old map made of thin, shimmering material. The journal explains that too, she said, carefully spreading the map on the table. My son writes that they discovered the crystals could do more than store energy. They could create paths between stars. Do-hyun studied the map with growing amazement. It showed what looked like lines of energy connecting different star systems. They mapped space lanes using crystals. Yes, Nuri said. The crystals showed them where they could safely travel, but they needed many crystals working together to make the ships move. That's why everything was lost when the ships were damaged in the Great Flash. Song Yi had been quiet, studying her medical readings. Now she spoke up. Captain, I think I understand what happened to their descendants, the Lumini. The crystal energy didn't just change their bodies to glow. It changed their DNA itself. They adapted to use starlight for energy, just like the crystals did. Hye-jin felt a shiver run down her spine. The implications were staggering. Their ancestors hadn't just discovered space travel. They had found a way to work with the fundamental energy of the universe. And their descendants had evolved to carry that energy within their own bodies. Tae-young continued reading from the journal. We knew Earth wasn't ready for this power. Nations fought over land and resources. What would they do with the power to reach the stars? So we made our choice. Those of us who knew the crystal craft would leave, taking the knowledge with us. Better to wait 1,000 years than to see our discovery used for war. They were protecting humanity from itself, Hye-jin said softly. They saw what might happen if this power fell into the wrong hands. But why didn't they come back? Du-hyun asked. Once they settled here, why not return to Earth? Nuri walked to the display case holding the last ship crystal. The Great Flash changed everything. The journal says it was like a storm of light that filled the whole sky. Most of the ship's crystals shattered. They'd barely managed to land safely here. Some kind of solar flare, Song Yi suggested, or a nearby star going supernova. Whatever it was, Era said, it forced them to stay. But they didn't see it as a tragedy. Listen to my son's last entry. She nodded to Tae-young, who found the page and read. Perhaps this is where we were meant to be all along. Our crystals led us here, to this beautiful world. We will make a new home here, and we will keep our knowledge safe. To those who find this record in the future, we are not lost. We are the guardians of a power humanity must learn to use wisely. When you are ready, when you have learned to reach for the stars in peace, you will find us, and we will be waiting. Hye-jin looked around the room at her team. Song Yi was comparing her scanner readings with ancient crystal diagrams. Du-hyun and Nuri were studying the star path map, trying to understand how the crystal ships had navigated. Tae-young and Ara were deep in discussion about the evolution of language over 5,000 years. "We need to understand everything," He-jin said firmly. "Not just the history, but the science too. Song-yi, work with the Lumini medical teams. Find out exactly how the crystal energy changed their ancestors. Do-hyun, see if you can learn anything about how those star paths might work with our modern space travel technology." She turned to Tae-young. "Every word in that journal is precious. We need to know exactly how they worked with the crystals. Earth's scientists will want to replicate their discoveries." "What about the warning?" Era asked quietly. "About humanity needing to be ready." He-jin touched her grandmother's pin, thinking carefully before she answered. 5,000 years ago, our ancestors weren't ready for this power. They were wise enough to know that. But today, we've learned to travel between stars on our own. We've learned to meet new civilizations in peace." She smiled at Ara. "I think we're finally ready for what they wanted to teach us." Nuri's skin glowed brighter. "Then perhaps it is time to show you the caves." Everyone in the room turned to look at her. "Caves?" He-jin asked. "Yes," Nuri said. "The caves where our ancestors stored the remaining crystals. We could never make them work, but we protected them, waiting for the day our star brothers would return. Would you like to see them?" He-jin looked at her team, seeing the same answer in all their faces. "Yes," she said. "Show us everything. It's time for both our peoples to reclaim this legacy." As they prepared to leave the Hall of Ancestors, He-jin sent a quick message to the horizon in orbit. Earth needed to know what they had found. Not just ancient history or advanced technology, but proof that humanity's first steps into space had been taken with wisdom and foresight. Their ancestors had carried a precious secret across the stars, and their descendants had preserved it for 5 millennia. Now, finally, both branches of humanity could learn from it together. The real work was just beginning. The crystal caves lay deep beneath the surface of the Lumini city. As He-jin and her team followed their hosts down the ancient stone steps, their way was lit by the natural glow of their Lumini guides. The light from their skin created dancing shadows on the cave walls. "Our ancestors chose these caves because they reminded them of the ones on Earth where they first found the crystals," Nuri explained. Her voice echoed softly in the tunnel. "They said the rock here had the same song." "Song?" Dr. Song-ye asked, her medical scanner humming as she worked. "You mean some kind of vibration?" "Listen," Era said, stopping at the bottom of the stairs. Everyone fell quiet. At first, He-jin heard nothing. Then, very faintly, she noticed a sound like distant wind chimes. It seemed to come from the rocks themselves. "The whole cave system is full of crystal veins," Nuri said. "Not all of them are useful for star travel, but they all carry the music of the stars." The tunnel opened into a vast chamber that took everyone's breath away. Crystals of all sizes grew from the walls and ceiling. Some were as small as He-jin's finger, others as large as a person. In the light from the Lumini skin, they sparkled like countless stars. "It's beautiful," Tae-young whispered, her hand reaching out to touch the nearest crystal. As her fingers made contact, the crystal gave off a soft hum. "They respond to touch." Do-hyun had been quiet, but now he spoke up. "These formations, they're not random." He pointed to the way the crystals grew in spiraling patterns across the cave walls. "They look like star maps." "Yes," Era said, her skin glowing brighter with excitement. "Our ancestors arranged them this way. Each pattern represents a different star path they discovered. But we could never make them work. The knowledge of how to wake them was lost." He-jin walked deeper into the cave, studying the crystal formations. Her grandmother's pin caught the light from a particularly large crystal, sending rainbow sparkles across the cave wall. Suddenly, the crystal began to pulse with its own light. Everyone turned to look. The crystal's glow matched the rhythm of the Lumini's skin light perfectly. "That's never happened before," Nuri said, her voice filled with wonder. "The crystals have always been dormant for us." Song-ye rushed forward with her scanner. Captain, the energy pattern. It's changing. It's synchronizing with both the Lumini bioluminescence and something else. She looked up at He-Jin. Your grandmother's pin. He-Jin touched the pin carefully. My grandmother said it was made from a strange crystal she found near the Han River when she was young. She always said it was special, but I never knew why. The Han River, Tai-Young said excitedly. That's where my son's journal said they found the first crystals. Captain, your grandmother's pin. It must be made from one of the original Earth crystals. The large crystal's glow grew stronger, and others around it began to light up too. Soon, the whole cave was filling with soft, pulsing light that matched the rhythm of the Lumini skin. The crystals, Era breathed. They're awakening. After 5,000 years, they're finally awakening. Song Yi's scanner was beeping frantically. The energy patterns are incredible. The crystals aren't just storing light. They're somehow connecting with each other. And look. She pointed to where the light from different crystals met in the air. Faint lines of energy were becoming visible, forming patterns that looked like the star maps from Mei Sun's journal. They're showing us the paths, Du Hyun said. The same paths our ancestors used to travel between stars. He-Jin watched in amazement as more crystals lit up, creating a glowing web of energy throughout the cave. The humming sound grew stronger, becoming a clear, beautiful melody that seemed to fill not just their ears but their whole bodies. The Song of the Stars, Nuri said softly, just as the ancient texts described it. Tai-Young was recording everything with trembling hands. This is how they did it, she said. The crystals don't just store energy. They're like keys that unlock paths through space. And the Lumini. She turned to Era. Your people didn't just adapt to use starlight. You became living keys. Era's skin pulsed with bright blue light. Yes, that's why we could never make the crystals work alone. We needed both, the crystal technology from Earth and the changed bodies of the Lumini. We needed both peoples to come together again. He-Jin looked at her grandmother's pin, then at the web of energy filling the cave. 5,000 years, she said. They left Earth to protect this power until humanity was ready. They changed, evolved, became the Lumini. And all this time, they were waiting for us to find our own way to the stars. So we could learn it together, Du Hyun finished. Not as a weapon or a tool for power, but as a bridge between worlds. Song Yi's scanner had finally calmed down. The energy readings are stable now, she said. I think we could learn to use this, not just for space travel, but for clean energy, medical treatment, maybe even environmental restoration. Will you help us understand it? He-Jin asked Ara and Nuri. Help us use it wisely, the way our ancestors hoped we would. The two Lumini women looked at each other, their skin glowing with matching patterns of light. Yes, Era said. That is why we preserved everything. Not just the language or the technology, but the wisdom behind it. We are ready to share it all. And we have much to learn from you too, Nuri added. You found your own way to the stars. You learned to meet new peoples in peace. Perhaps that is what our ancestors were waiting for, not just for Earth to have the right technology, but the right heart to use it. He-Jin touched her grandmother's pin one last time, thinking of how many generations of both peoples had waited for this moment. The old woman had always said the pin would lead He-Jin to something wonderful among the stars. She couldn't have known it would lead to this, the reunion of two branches of humanity, separated by 5,000 years and countless light years, but joined again by wisdom, patience, and hope. The crystals continued their song, filling the cave with light and music. In their glow, He-Jin could see the faces of her team and their Lumini hosts, all wearing expressions of wonder and joy. This wasn't just a scientific discovery or a historical revelation. It was the beginning of something new, a future where humanity's first step into the stars could guide their next great journey together. What do we do now? Du Hyun asked, looking at the glowing crystal web above them. He-Jin smiled. Now we learn. We learn everything our ancestors wanted to teach us, and then we go forward together into the stars they showed us how to reach. Around them, the crystal song grew stronger, as if agreeing with her words. The light pulsed through the cave like a heartbeat, connecting Earth and Lumini, past and future, in a dance of starlight that had waited 5,000 years to begin again.